I actually love my wife very much. I would never have expected something like this from my friends. I can't erase the day I saw them in bed from my memory. There is still a rage inside me. I would not allow them to live.
Before going to prison, who was Robert Martinez? How did a calm man turn into a killer who murdered 3 people? Was it just a case of infidelity? You'll find out shortly. But before we continue, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Robert Martinez was born in 1976 in Tucson, Arizona, to a traditional Mexican-American family. His father, Carlos Martinez, worked construction for 30 years, while his mother, Maria Martinez, raised 4 children while cleaning houses. The family struggled financially, but their home was filled with values of hard work, loyalty, and family honor that would later shape Robert's understanding of betrayal. From childhood, Robert learned that a man's word was his bond, and that family came before everything. Carlos Martinez often told his son, "Mijo, in this world, all you have is your reputation and your family. If someone disrespects either one, you stand up and fight." These lessons about masculine honor would eventually guide Robert toward his darkest moment. After graduation in 1994, Robert followed his father into construction while studying automotive technology part-time. By age 25, he had opened his own auto repair shop, Martinez Motors, in a working-class Phoenix neighborhood. His business philosophy reflected his upbringing. Treat customers fairly, do honest work, and build relationships based on trust. In 2003, Robert met Lisa Chun at a community festival. She was a 24-year-old nursing student from a middle-class family. Their relationship represented something new for Robert, a chance to build something beyond the working-class world he'd known. They married in 2005 after a courtship friends described as passionate but sometimes stormy. The marriage's early years appeared stable from the outside. Robert expanded his shop to include 2 employees, and Lisa became a registered nurse at Phoenix General Hospital. They purchased a modest house in a quiet suburban neighborhood, representing Robert's vision of the American dream achieved through hard work. Robert's relationships with David Thompson and Michael Rodriguez developed over several years through the auto shop. David, an insurance salesman, became a customer when Robert repaired his sedan in 2010. Michael, a construction foreman, met Robert through work connections. What started as business relationships evolved into genuine friendships. The 3 men would watch football games together, share beers after work, and include their wives in barbecues and holiday celebrations. Robert viewed these friendships as extensions of his family, sacred bonds that required absolute loyalty and trust. He regularly lent money to friends and provided free automotive work for those struggling financially. Robert's personality combined traditional masculine values with a generous spirit that made him vulnerable to exploitation. His worldview was built on clear distinctions between right and wrong, with infidelity representing the worst possible violation of trust. He could forgive many things, but could never tolerate what he perceived as deliberate betrayal. By 2015, Robert's life appeared to represent middle-class success, a thriving business, a stable marriage, close friendships, and financial security. However, beneath this surface stability were growing tensions that he either couldn't or wouldn't acknowledge. Lisa's nursing career had advanced significantly, giving her independence that sometimes made Robert uncomfortable. The psychological foundation that made Robert capable of triple murder was his fusion of personal identity with concept of honor, loyalty, and masculine pride. He didn't just love his wife and trust his friends. These relationships defined who he was as a man. When that foundation crumbled in a single afternoon, Robert's sense of self collapsed, leaving room only for rage and violent justice. Robert Martinez's carefully constructed world began its slow collapse in late 2015, when subtle changes in his wife's behavior suggested that the foundation of trust he'd built his entire adult life upon might not be as solid as he believed. The deterioration that would ultimately lead to 3 deaths started with small inconsistencies that Robert initially dismissed as normal marriage evolution. Lisa's nursing career at Phoenix General Hospital had flourished beyond expectations. By 2015, she had been promoted to charge nurse in the intensive care unit, a position that brought both increased responsibility and significantly higher income. For the first time in their marriage, Lisa was earning more money than Robert, a shift that challenged his traditional understanding of gender roles and family hierarchy. The change in Lisa's professional status coincided with what appeared to be growing social confidence that made Robert increasingly uncomfortable. She began attending medical conferences in other cities, joining professional organizations with evening meetings, and developing friendships with colleagues that didn't automatically include Robert. These changes weren't necessarily suspicious, but they represented a version of Lisa that Robert didn't recognize. Robert's initial response was to intensify his efforts to maintain connection through methods that had always worked. He planned elaborate date nights, surprised her with expensive gifts that strained the auto shop's budget, and attempted to insert himself into her professional world by attending hospital social events where he felt awkward and out of place. David Thompson and Michael Rodriguez had become increasingly important fixtures in Robert's life as his marriage grew more distant. The three men had developed a routine of meeting every Thursday evening at Murphy's Bar, where they would drink beer, watch sports, and discuss their jobs, families, and share frustrations with the changing world around them. During these Thursday gatherings, Robert began expressing concerns about Lisa's behavior that his friends initially dismissed as normal marital adjustments. "She's just growing in her career," David would reassure him. "That's part of what you love about her." Michael would agree, adding that his own wife had gone through similar phases of independence. However, as 2016 progressed, Robert's concerns became more specific and harder to dismiss. Lisa was working longer hours, including shifts that didn't appear on the hospital's public schedule. She would receive text messages during dinner that she would read privately before quickly putting her phone away. Most troubling to Robert, she had begun showing less interest in the physical intimacy that had always been important to their relationship. Robert's attempt to address these changes directly with Lisa resulted in conversations that left him feeling more confused and isolated. When he asked about her new schedule, she would provide explanations that were technically plausible but felt evasive. When he suggested they spend more time together, she would agree enthusiastically, but then cancel plans due to unexpected work obligations. The situation deteriorated when Robert discovered that Lisa had opened a separate bank account without discussing it. When confronted, she explained that she wanted independent savings for professional expenses and educational opportunities. The explanation was reasonable, but it violated the complete financial transparency that had characterized their marriage. By early 2017, Robert's Thursday evening conversations with David and Michael had become increasingly focused on his marital problems. Both men offered support and advice, but Robert began to suspect they were holding back information that might be helpful. He started asking more pointed questions about their observations of Lisa's behavior during group social events. David and Michael's responses to these questions became noticeably more careful and evasive. They would acknowledge that Lisa seemed different lately, but insisted that the changes appeared positive rather than concerning. When Robert pressed for specific examples, they would redirect the conversation to other topics or suggest that his concerns might be exaggerated. The first concrete evidence of deception came in June 2017, when Robert decided to surprise Lisa at the hospital during what she had told him was a mandatory overtime shift. When he arrived at the ICU, he learned that Lisa had left 2 hours earlier and that no overtime had been scheduled. The nursing supervisor seemed genuinely confused about Lisa's whereabouts. When Robert confronted Lisa about this discrepancy that evening, she became defensive and angry in a way that was completely out of character. She accused him of not trusting her, of being controlling, and of trying to sabotage her professional success. The argument ended with Lisa sleeping in the guest bedroom for the first time in their marriage. Robert's response to this crisis was to begin actively investigating his wife's activities, a decision that violated every principle of trust and respect that had guided their relationship. He started checking her phone when she was in the shower, monitoring the mileage on her car, and even driving by locations where she claimed to be spending time. These investigations revealed a pattern of deception that was both systematic and sophisticated. Lisa was regularly claiming to be in places where she wasn't, meeting with people she didn't mention, and spending money from her separate account on activities that she kept secret. Most disturbing was the discovery that David and Michael seemed to be aware of at least some of these deceptions. The breakthrough came in October 2017, when Robert found a receipt in Lisa's purse for a hotel room that had been booked on an evening when she claimed to be attending a medical conference. When he called the hotel, he learned that the room had been reserved under David Thompson's name and had been occupied by 2 people. Robert's confrontation with David about the hotel receipt produced a confession that shattered his understanding of both his marriage and his friendships. David admitted that he and Lisa had been involved in an affair for over a year, and that Michael had known about the relationship for several months. The affair had begun during a period when Robert was working extended hours to expand his auto shop. David's explanation for the affair combined genuine remorse with justifications that enraged Robert further. He claimed that Lisa had been lonely and feeling neglected, that the relationship had developed gradually without anyone intending for it to happen, and that both he and Lisa had been planning to end the affair when the time seemed right. Michael's role in the deception was particularly devastating because it represented not just romantic betrayal by his wife and best friend, but the complete breakdown of the loyalty and honesty that defined masculine friendship in Robert's worldview. Michael admitted that he had encouraged David to end the affair, but felt conflicted about betraying his friend's confidence. The period between Robert's discovery of the affair in October 2017 and the shooting in March 2018 was characterized by an escalating cycle of confrontations, temporary reconciliations, and deeper betrayals that destroyed Robert's psychological stability. Lisa alternated between denying the affair, minimizing its significance, and blaming Robert for creating conditions that made the relationship inevitable. Throughout this period, Robert's relationships with David and Michael became increasingly toxic. Both men claimed to want to repair their friendships with Robert, while continuing to maintain contact with Lisa in ways that made genuine reconciliation impossible. Robert began to suspect that the affair was continuing despite Lisa's promises to end it. The final betrayal occurred in February 2018, when Robert discovered that Lisa, David, and Michael had been meeting regularly at their house while he was working, sometimes for several hours during periods when Lisa claimed to be running errands. Security footage from a neighbor's camera revealed that these meetings had been happening for months. By March 2018, Robert's mental state had deteriorated to the point where he was experiencing symptoms of severe depression, anxiety, and what would later be diagnosed as post-traumatic stress disorder. He was sleeping poorly, drinking heavily, and having intrusive thoughts about violence and revenge that frightened him but seemed impossible to control. Tuesday, March 13, 2018. The afternoon that would transform Robert Martinez from a respected local businessman into a triple murderer began with an impulsive decision to surprise his wife with flowers and an early return home to celebrate what should have been their 13th wedding anniversary. Instead of the romantic gesture he had planned, Robert discovered a scene of betrayal that would destroy 4 lives in minutes. Robert had spent the morning at Martinez Motors dealing with a complicated transmission repair that had taken longer than expected. Despite the time pressure, he decided to close the shop early and stop at Desert Blooms Florist to buy the white roses that Lisa had carried on their wedding day. His plan was to arrive home around 2 p.m. before Lisa returned from her hospital shift and prepare a romantic dinner. The decision to leave work early was completely spontaneous, driven by Robert's desperate hope that a grand romantic gesture might recapture the intimacy and trust that had been eroding for over 2 years. He had not told Lisa about his plans, wanting the surprise to demonstrate a commitment to rebuilding their marriage despite the ongoing tensions and unresolved issues surrounding her affair with David. As Robert drove through their quiet suburban neighborhood at 1:45 p.m., he felt optimistic for the first time in months. The previous evening, Lisa had seemed more affectionate than usual, and she had suggested that they plan a weekend trip together to work on their relationship. Robert interpreted these signals as evidence that Lisa was finally ready to end her involvement with David. Robert's first indication that something was wrong came when he noticed David's blue Honda Civic parked in their driveway next to Michael's red pickup truck. His initial reaction was confusion rather than suspicion. While it was unusual for both men to visit during the day when he wasn't home, there could be innocent explanations for their presence. Perhaps they were helping Lisa with a household project or dealing with some emergency. The front door was unlocked, which was normal for their neighborhood during daylight hours. As Robert entered the house carrying the bouquet of white roses, he could hear voices and laughter coming from the direction of the master bedroom. The sounds were muffled but clearly indicated that multiple people were in the house, and the tone suggested intimacy rather than casual conversation. Robert approached toward the bedroom was cautious and increasingly fearful as the implications of what he was hearing became impossible to ignore. The voices were definitely Lisa's, David's, and Michael's, and the context was unmistakably sexual. Robert could hear Lisa's voice in particular, expressing pleasure and intimacy in ways that she hadn't shared with him in over 2 years. When Robert reached the partially open bedroom door, he encountered a scene that would be permanently burned into his memory and would ultimately justify, in his mind, the violence that followed. Lisa was naked in their marital bed with both David and Michael, engaged in sexual activity that appeared consensual and enthusiastic rather than coercive or accidental. The emotional impact of this discovery was immediate and catastrophic. Robert experienced what psychologists would later describe as acute psychological trauma, combined with explosive rage that overwhelmed his normal decision-making processes. The sight of his wife with both of his closest friends represented not just infidelity, but a complete betrayal of every relationship and value that had given his life meaning. Robert stood in the doorway for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 10 or 15 seconds, trying to process what he was seeing and determine how to respond. During this brief period, none of the 3 people in the bedroom noticed his presence, allowing Robert to observe their behavior and confirm that this was not a momentary mistake, but an ongoing, comfortable arrangement. The white roses fell from Robert's hands as the full magnitude of betrayal became clear. This wasn't just an affair between Lisa and David. It was a threesome that included Michael, which meant that both his best friends had been sexually involved with his wife, probably for months or even years. The Thursday evening conversations where both men had offered advice about his marital problems now seemed like cruel manipulation. Robert's next actions were driven by a combination of rage, humiliation, and a complete psychological breakdown that occurs when someone's entire understanding of reality is destroyed in a single moment. He turned away from the bedroom and walked quickly to the garage, where he kept his hunting rifle in a locked cabinet that he opened with hands that were surprisingly steady despite his emotional state. The Remington 700 bolt-action rifle had been a gift from his father-in-law during the early years of his marriage, intended for hunting trips that Robert and Lisa had planned but never taken. Robert had used the weapon only a few times at shooting ranges, but he was familiar with its operation and knew that it was loaded with 5 rounds of .30-06 ammunition. When Robert returned to the bedroom with the rifle, the 3 people who had been the most important relationships in his adult life were still engaged in sexual activity, completely unaware that their lives were about to end. Robert's approach was quiet enough that his presence wasn't detected until he spoke, giving him several seconds to observe the scene again and confirm that he wasn't misinterpreting what was happening. "Get away from my wife," Robert said in a voice that was calm and controlled despite the emotional chaos he was experiencing internally. The sound of his voice caused immediate panic as Lisa, David, and Michael realized that they had been discovered and that Robert was armed with a weapon capable of killing all 3 of them. Lisa's reaction was to scream and attempt to cover herself with bed sheets, while simultaneously trying to position herself between Robert and the 2 men. David and Michael both tried to get out of bed and move toward their clothes, but Robert's position in the doorway blocked their access to the exit. "Robert, please, let's explain," David said, raising his hands in a gesture of surrender while trying to edge toward the bathroom door. "This isn't what you think. We can work this out. Nobody needs to get hurt." His voice carried the tone of someone trying to negotiate with a person who might be mentally unstable, which only increased Robert's rage. Michael's response was more aggressive and proved to be the catalyst for the violence that followed. Instead of attempting to de-escalate the situation, he moved toward Robert with apparent intent to wrestle the rifle away. "Robert, put the gun down and let's talk about this like men," he said. "You're scaring Lisa. This isn't the way to handle this situation." Robert's first shot was aimed at Michael, hitting him in the chest from a distance of approximately 8 feet. The .30-06 round caused massive trauma that killed him almost instantly, and his body fell backward on the bed next to Lisa, who began screaming hysterically. The sound of the gunshot in the enclosed bedroom was deafening. David's attempt to escape through the bathroom was stopped by Robert's second shot, which struck him in the back as he reached for the bathroom door handle. David fell forward into the bathroom doorway, where he died within minutes from blood loss and organ damage. His final words were reportedly an attempt to apologize to Robert. Lisa's death was the most deliberate and emotionally complex of the 3 killings. After shooting both men, Robert stood over his wife, who was covered in blood from Michael's wounds and was begging for her life while trying to explain her actions. Robert later testified that during these final moments, Lisa admitted that the threesome had been happening regularly for over a year. Robert's final shot was aimed directly at Lisa's head from close range, ensuring immediate death and eliminating any possibility that she might survive to face the consequences of her betrayal. Her death represented not just the end of their marriage, but Robert's final rejection of the possibility that their relationship could ever be repaired. After the shooting, Robert sat on the edge of the bed, holding the rifle and staring at the three bodies for approximately 20 minutes before calling 911. During this time, he later reported, he felt a sense of calm and satisfaction that justice had been served, combined with a gradual realization that his own life was effectively over. When Robert finally called 911 at 2:47 p.m., his voice was steady and cooperative. "I came home and found my wife in bed with my two best friends," he told the emergency dispatcher. "I shot all three of them. They're dead. I'll be waiting in the kitchen for the police to arrive." Police and paramedic units arrived at the house at 3:15 p.m. to find Robert sitting calmly at his kitchen table with a rifle placed on the floor nearby. He offered no resistance to arrest and immediately confessed to the shootings, providing a detailed account that was consistent with the physical evidence found at the scene. Robert Martinez's trial became one of Arizona's most emotionally charged cases of 2019, dividing public opinion between those who saw him as a wronged husband driven to justifiable homicide and those who viewed him as a cold-blooded killer. The legal system faced a challenge of prosecuting a man whose victims had betrayed him while maintaining that no personal grievance justifies taking three lives. Maricopa County District Attorney Sarah Chin moved swiftly to charge Robert with 3 counts of first-degree murder, emphasizing the premeditated nature of his actions. Robert Martinez had multiple opportunities to choose differently, Chin stated. Instead, he retrieved a rifle and systematically executed 3 human beings. This was calculated murder. Robert's defense attorney, veteran criminal lawyer James Patterson, faced a difficult task of defending a client who had confessed to the killings while attempting to generate sympathy for his motivations. During their first meeting, Robert told Patterson, "I'm not going to lie about what I did. They betrayed me in my own home, and I killed them." Public reaction to the case was intense and deeply divided. Many men identified with Robert's sense of betrayal, viewing his actions as understandable. Online forums celebrated Robert as a hero who had defended masculine honor. Conversely, domestic violence advocates argued that the killings represented the dangerous extreme of possessive behavior. The trial began on September 15, 2019, with jury selection taking nearly 3 weeks due to the case's notoriety. Ultimately, a jury of 8 men and 4 women was selected, with many potential jurors dismissed due to their inability to remain impartial about adultery and revenge. Prosecutor Chen's opening statement portrayed Robert as a controlling husband whose possessive tendencies had escalated into murderous rage. The defendant didn't kill these people to defend his honor, she argued. He killed them because he couldn't accept that his wife had chosen someone else. This case is about power and control. Defense attorney Patterson took a different approach, focusing on the psychological trauma of discovering his wife's betrayal. Robert Martinez trusted 3 people more than anyone else in the world, Patterson told the jury. Those 3 people conspired to betray that trust in the most devastating way possible. The prosecution's case methodically established the facts while emphasizing Robert's calm demeanor afterward and his lack of remorse. Medical examiner Dr. Angela Foster testified that each victim had died from a single gunshot wound, with bullet trajectories suggesting deliberate aim rather than wild firing. The most dramatic moment came when Robert testified on his own behalf for nearly 4 hours. His testimony was notable for a complete lack of apology. "I love those 3 people more than my own life," he told the jury. "When I saw what they were doing, something died inside me. I couldn't let them continue to make a fool of me." The jury deliberated for 6 days before reaching their verdict on October 8, 2019. They found Robert guilty of 3 counts of second-degree murder rather than first-degree, accepting that his actions were driven by extreme emotional disturbance rather than calculated planning. Judge Maria Rodriguez sentenced Robert to 28 years in prison without parole, acknowledging the exceptional circumstances, while emphasizing that personal betrayal cannot justify taking human life. "Mr. Martinez suffered a devastating betrayal," she stated. However, civilized society cannot permit individuals to take justice into their own hands. Robert's reaction to his sentence was characteristically stoic. 28 years is a long time, but they're dead forever. I can live with that trade. Arizona State Prison Complex. Lewis became Robert Martinez's new home at age 43, beginning what would be a lifetime journey of incarceration for his systematic execution of his wife and two closest friends. Unlike many inmates who struggle with prison transition, Robert adapted to the structured environment with the same methodical approach he had applied to running his auto repair business. Robert's initial reception at Lewis was complicated by the nature of his crimes and media attention. While many inmates respected him for taking revenge against unfaithful partners, others viewed his actions as excessive. Prison administrators placed him in protective custody for his first 6 months while assessing how he would integrate into the general population. His first cellmate was Marcus Williams, a lifer who had been incarcerated for 15 years following his own domestic homicide conviction. Marcus recognized something familiar in Robert's story and helped him navigate the complex social dynamics of prison life. "You got respect in here because you stood up for yourself," Marcus explained. "But you also got to show people you ain't crazy." The first year was marked by intensive psychological evaluation as prison staff tried to understand Robert's mental state and assess his risk to other inmates and staff. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the prison's chief psychologist, conducted weekly sessions with Robert, initially meeting significant resistance to any form of counseling or therapeutic intervention. Robert's relationship with his extended family during this period was strained but not completely severed. His parents visited monthly, though conversations were often difficult. His father, Carlos, struggled to reconcile his pride in Robert's defense of family honor with his disappointment in the violent methods chosen. In his second year, Robert made a decision that would define his prison experience. He would use his mechanical skills to find purpose within the institutional environment. The prison's automotive maintenance program needed experienced mechanics, and Robert's expertise made him valuable to both staff and fellow inmates who worked in the motor pool maintaining prison vehicles. Robert's work in the automotive program provided him with a sense of identity and purpose that many long-term inmates struggle to find. He trained younger prisoners in basic mechanical skills, supervised vehicle maintenance projects, and eventually became the informal leader of the entire program. This role gave him status within the prison hierarchy while allowing him to use lifelong skills. A significant turning point came in his fourth year when Robert was approached by David Thompson's family through the prison's Victim Impact Program. David's mother, Patricia Thompson, requested a meeting to confront the man who had killed her son. The encounter was emotionally intense and transformative for both participants. Patricia Thompson's confrontation forced Robert to acknowledge the human cost of his revenge beyond his own family's suffering. "David wasn't perfect," she told him, "but he was my son, and he didn't deserve to die for his mistakes." Robert's response was measured but unrepentant. "I'm sorry for your loss, Mrs. Thompson, but David betrayed me in my own home. I couldn't let that stand." By his fifth year, Robert had become a respected figure within Lewis's general population. His combination of mechanical expertise, calm demeanor, and obvious intelligence made him valuable to both prisoners and staff. He was selected to participate in a vocational training program that paired experienced inmates with those preparing for release. Robert's teaching abilities proved exceptional, and he developed a curriculum that prepared dozens of inmates for automotive certification exams. His students consistently achieved higher pass rates than those in other programs, and several found employment immediately upon release. This success gave Robert accomplishment that helped offset the otherwise purposeless nature of his incarceration. In his sixth year, Robert completed his high school equivalency diploma and enrolled in correspondence courses through Arizona State University. His studies focused on business management and automotive technology, subjects that allowed him to expand his expertise while maintaining connection to his pre-prison identity as a successful business owner. The Victim Impact Program continued to play an important role in Robert's prison experience. Over the years, he met with family members of all three victims, participating in difficult conversations that forced him to examine his actions from perspectives other than his own. While he never expressed regret for the killings themselves, these encounters helped him develop more nuanced understanding of consequences. Currently in his 8th year at Lewis, Robert serves as the head instructor for the prison's automotive vocational program. His life sentence means he will never be released, but he has found meaning in preparing other inmates for successful reintegration into society. Prison staff and fellow inmates respect his expertise and consistent behavior. In January 2026, Robert Martinez is 50 years old and entering his 8th year at Arizona State Prison Complex, Lewis. His 28-year sentence means he will not be eligible for release until 2046, but has built a meaningful existence within incarceration constraints, becoming one of the most respected inmates in the Arizona correctional system. Robert's daily routine reflects the discipline that has defined his entire adult life. He rises at 5:30 a.m. for a personal exercise and reflection, followed by breakfast in his role as head instructor in the prison's automotive vocational program. His afternoons are devoted to individual mentoring sessions with inmates preparing for release, while evenings are reserved for correspondence courses and personal reading. Recent psychological evaluations present a complex picture of a man who has found peace with his circumstances while remaining completely unrepentant about his crimes. Dr. Walsh's latest assessment notes, Mr. Martinez demonstrates exceptional emotional stability and has become a positive influence within the prison community. However, he continues to express no regret for his actions and maintains that he would make identical choices if faced with the same circumstances. Robert's relationship with the outside world has evolved into something quite different from his pre-prison connections. His parents visit quarterly and maintain regular correspondence, but both acknowledge that Robert's transformation into a killer fundamentally changed their relationship. They support his prison activities while struggling to reconcile their love for their son with their disapproval of his actions. Robert's educational achievements during incarceration have been remarkable. He holds an associate degree in automotive technology and is working toward a bachelor's degree in business management through Arizona State University's correspondence program. His academic work focuses on vocational education and prisoner rehabilitation, drawing on his experience training inmates. The automotive program has become Robert's primary legacy within the prison system. Under his leadership, the program has expanded to include advanced diagnostic training and partnerships with local employers who specifically recruit program graduates. The recidivism rate among his students is significantly lower than the state average, making the program a model for other facilities. Mental health professionals continue to study Robert's case as an example of how violent criminals can channel their skills in constructive directions during long-term incarceration. Robert himself remains philosophical about his situation and his future. He acknowledges that he will likely die in prison, but expresses no bitterness about his sentence. Looking toward the remaining decades of his incarceration, Robert continues his work in vocational education while pursuing his academic studies. He has become a case study for corrections professionals interested in rehabilitation and prisoner education, consulted by researchers seeking to understand how to help violent offenders find purpose within institutional settings. Robert's view of his crimes remains unchanged after 8 years of incarceration. He maintains that his actions were justified by the circumstances he discovered and that any reasonable man would have responded similarly. Robert Martinez's story represents one of the most troubling intersections of betrayal, masculine honor, and deadly violence in contemporary American criminal history. His systematic execution of his wife and 2 closest friends raises fundamental questions about justice, loyalty, and the boundaries of acceptable human behavior. The tragedy that destroyed 4 lives and shattered multiple families was the inevitable result of colliding worldviews about relationships, trust, and acceptable responses to betrayal. Robert's traditional understanding of masculine honor created expectations that modern relationship dynamics made difficult to maintain. Robert's decision to kill rather than divorce reflects a value system that prioritizes reputation over human life. His 8 years of incarceration have not changed his fundamental belief that some betrayals justify lethal revenge, suggesting that his actions represented core character rather than temporary breakdown. Prison has provided Robert with structure that allows him to contribute positively while serving his sentence. His transformation from business owner to prison educator demonstrates human capacity for adaptation within the constraints of permanent incarceration. Robert Martinez, now 50 years old, will spend the remainder of his life in prison, carrying the weight of 3 deaths.